who served one term as New Hampshire's SD Senate District 9 Senator after a career as a tech entrepreneur. Following her defeat in 2020, she began researching the Free State Project's activities and affiliations in New Hampshire. For the last 4 years, she's been working with the Granite State Matters board members, the 10th Street Postcarding Group, and others to raise awareness of the Free State Projects Association with out-of-state billionaires and their plans to turn our state into their libertarian utopia. Please welcome Jeanne Dietsch. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to try to project. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. If I start going softer and softer, raise your hand. Yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Way too many people in New Hampshire don't know that hiding in plain sight amidst our beautiful forests is a cult called the Free State Project. They have worked for 22 years to turn our state into their libertarian homeland. You probably don't know Dennis Pratt. He's one of the Free Staters working to attract 20,000 liberty-minded people to move to New Hampshire from around the US and even the world to get the rest of us to leave. But you probably do know that Kelly Ayotte signed an expansion of tax-funded voucher subsidies to the state's wealthiest families. But a lot of people don't know that the Free State Project claims responsibility for this tax-funded giveaway. But even most Free Staters don't know the full story of the half-century of work that went into making this happen. So this is the story I'm about to tell so that we can wake up New Hampshire, because we don't have much sway in DC, but we have enormous impact in the future of our state. Our story has 3 parts. First, we'll see just who the Free Staters are. Then we'll look at who and what groups are empowering them and setting their agenda. And finally, we'll start planning how we can take back our state. So who are these people determined to take over and push out those who've lived here for decades? Well, libertarians have been around the US for nearly a century. But a Yale political science student named Jason Sorens was tired of the slow progress they were making. He came up with a plan for libertarians to focus on one small state. It was published in the Libertarian Enterprise's July 2001 issue. It said, well, you can read it, "What I propose is a Free State Project in which freedom-minded people pledge that you will establish residence in a small state. And once we've taken over the state government, we can slash state and local budgets." That's their goal. The Free State Project would start when 5,000 people signed up to move, and in 2003 they reached their target for signups and chose New Hampshire as their libertarian homeland. The influx began. So who are the Free Staters? Well, many of them are just sort of 21st century hippies who want to farm or start a small business. They want to smoke their weed, shoot their guns. But the cult attracts more men than women. And a Boston TV series interviewed a young man who said he'd never had a friend before he joined the Free Staters. They have regular meetups, they help newcomers move, they host music festivals, and provide other social support to lonely people. But some of the leaders you've heard of, for instance, Lily Tang Williams, the candidate for Congress. Greg Moore, you see him here in his current position as director of the Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity, New Hampshire. You see him proudly supporting the Citizens United decision that lets unlimited money flow into campaigns. Back in 2011, Moore was chief of staff of the New Hampshire House. Carly we got the different person here. Oh, then we have Jason Osborne. He was elected to the House in 2014 and is now House Majority Leader. Carla Gericke is a former Free State Director and New Hampshire State Rep. And we can't forget the founder, Jason Sorens. He's been a fellow with the Koch's Mercatus Center at George Mason University since 2008. In 2018, the Kochs donated $1 million to St. Anselm's College, and then St. Anselm's hired Sorens to direct their Center for Ethics in Society. Sean Faber just took over the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. The Liberty Alliance is the political arm of the Free State Project. They rank legislators according to their votes on liberty bills, and they primary the ones who don't follow in lockstep. Rachel Goldsmith heads the Hillsborough Moms for Liberty. That's the group that offered bounties on teachers. So these are some of the leaders of the Free State Project. Now, the Free State Project claims to be an apolitical 501c3 for tax purposes, despite its original mandate to take over state government. So it's dropped that goal. But here in their June newsletter, they mention that some of their movers just happen to run for state legislature. And they explicitly state their affiliation to their political arm, the Liberty Alliance, and to the Koch's Americans for Prosperity. I'm pointing this out because otherwise, what I'm going to tell you could just sound like another conspiracy theory. But you can see that the Free Staters themselves agree with this. The canvassers in this photo were paid by Americans for Prosperity. They worked to convince New Hampshire voters to support libertarian bills. But the AFP is not the only billionaire group that helps in New Hampshire. The Texas Young Americans for Liberty claimed that the young people it hired and sent to New Hampshire had knocked a total of 25,825 doors, made 118,000 phone calls to constituents, and dropped 21,755 mailers in New Hampshire. It hires youth here to support Texas libertarian policies. The Young Americans for Liberty also runs a training program to teach state candidates from around the country to vote libertarian. Oops. You may recognize some of the people here. Most states send 1, 2, or 3 people, and as you already saw, New Hampshire sent 94. So the obvious question is, why are billionaires from Texas or the Kochs from Wichita, Kansas, so darned interested in New Hampshire? This led me to another question I'd wondered about the entire time that I lived here, long before I became interested in politics, and that is, why is New Hampshire energy policy more like oil states, Texas or Kansas, when we don't have a single oil well in the state? And you can see here that we're ranked 35th in energy sustainability. Well, I knew the Sununu's were renowned for their climate denial, and when John H. Sununu was chief of staff, he convinced George Bush the first not to participate in the first climate accord, and I knew Sununu's son blocked the climate measures as a senator, and another son consulted to the fossil fuel industry. So I decided to dig a little further, and I found an interesting fact. John Sununu was a fellow student of Charles and David Koch for years. They all went to the MIT engineering department together, including a fellow named Kenneth Weiler, who you'll hear more about in a minute. But I learned something that surprised me even more than that. Guess who ran on this ticket in 1980? To be abolished, Department of Energy, Environmental Protection Agency, Food and Drug Administration, FCC, and on and on and on, to Social Security, welfare, public schools, and taxation. Boy, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Who was it? David Koch. In 1980, his platform got only 1% of the vote. So whose platform do you think this was? Economic growth, world at peace, family, community, workplace, and fulfill the hopes and aspirations of all Americans, black, white, women, men, young, old, urban, rural. Who do you think that was? Jimmy Carter? No. It was the Republican conservative paragon, Ronald Reagan. So tell me, are the Free State Project and their libertarian allies Reagan conservatives? Obviously no. So what do libertarians believe? Libertarians do not believe in democracy or what's stated in the Constitution, despite their saying they're constitutionalists. Democracy and the Constitution says that a majority may pass laws that everyone must follow. Libertarians considered rule by majority law to be coercive. So when you hear libertarians talk about liberty and freedom, what they mean is freedom from regulations and freedom from responsibilities. No zoning laws, no child welfare regulations, no hazardous waste, clean air restrictions. The sovereign individual has no responsibility to anyone but themselves. No nursing homes, Social Security, because old people should be taken care of by their family. Children born into poverty, well, it sucks to be you, not my problem. So when there are no rules and when selfishness prevails, might equals right. Billionaires are free to monopolize everything and lease it back to the public. For instance, Blackstone owned 65,000 houses. They bought up neighborhoods full of foreclosed homes during the recession. They own properties in Lebanon, Durham, and Nashua. Taking houses off the market raises prices. So Blackstone raises rents, and renters have nothing left to set aside for a down payment on a house, so they have to rent forever. Well, Kelly Ayotte was a member of the Blackstone board until after the election last fall, and over 5 years she was paid $750,000 out of the profits off those foreclosed homes. So Blackstone is just one example of how wealth exploits people under libertarian-style policies. But Ayotte is hardly a major player in the billionaire plutocrats' plans. You can read how they expect national governments to disappear after cryptocurrency makes it impossible to collect taxes, since transactions are all secret. And you can read how the plebeians will be left to fight among themselves in independent village for the scraps left by the mega-rich. You'll note that the preface to this edition of The Sovereign Individual was written by Peter Thiel, funder of J.D. Vance. So how did we get from the Republican platform of Ronald Reagan to the platform that is driving policy in New Hampshire and the nation now? Well, surprisingly enough, an early mover in the Free Staters was one of the initiators. Anybody read Libertarian Walked Into a Bear? Yeah. Well, that book was about this guy, Tim Condon's Freetown Project in Grafton. And before moving here, Tim Condon and some fellow students in Florida helped found a group called the National Republican Liberty Caucus. I read this in an old issue of the libertarian magazine Reason. Well, the mission of the Republican Liberty Caucus for over 2 decades has been to convert the Republican Party platform of Ronald Reagan into the libertarian platform of David Koch. And they're not too far from succeeding. Obviously, it took a lot more money and organization than just Tim Condon and his Florida bros. So we've looked at who the Free Staters and the Liberty Alliance are, the hippies, their leaders, and their beliefs. The next chapter in our story is about those behind their agenda. So back to the Kochs. After they only won 1% of the electorate in 1980, they signed on to fund a multi-decade plan to take over the government by other means. The Kochs and their wealthy colleagues own companies plagued by hundreds of millions in fines from the EPA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. It's taken their firms to court. A jury awarded $200 million against them for defrauding the government. Their father was a leader in the John Birch Society and taught the Koch boys that government is evil. And naturally, they support a party whose goal is to destroy the agencies plaguing them. So the Koch network is notorious for the extent of their capture of both governmental and civil institutions, especially after it pushed through Citizens United decision that let them spend without limit. The network took over media outlets, it set up think tanks and activist programs in each state, donated to colleges to hire libertarian faculty, it lobbied for laws to make the wealthy wealthier, and helped the Federalist Society stack the courts. At first, the Koch network treated New Hampshire just like any other state. They set up Americans for Prosperity, New Hampshire. They funded the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy and put their friend John Sununu as the chair. But it wasn't until later that Jason Sorens convinced them to focus on New Hampshire. The Kochs donated, as I said before, donated $1 million to St. Anselm's in 2018. And St. Anselm's made Sorens director, as I said, of the Center for Ethics and Society. So now you've seen something of the players behind the Free State Liberty Alliance agenda. So let's look step by step at how they work on a bill. For example, they thwart the will of the majority, promote the billionaire libertarian interests, while actually harming many Free Staters and Liberty Alliance members, as well as the general public. So we'll replay the EFA voucher story. At the beginning, in February 2021, the New Hampshire House heard the original voucher bill. I bet some of you remember this. And in the largest participation ever seen, 3,198 voters, likely including some of you, signed in to oppose the bill. Only 600 signed in favor. So what happened? Well, the bill started from ALEC. As many of you know, I'm sure, ALEC is a group funded by corporations and wealthy individuals to write templates for state bills. They feed the templates, like educational vouchers, to state legislatures through their ALEC chairs. Remember Ken Weiler, who studied engineering with the Kochs and Sununu at MIT? Well, Ken was an ALEC chair then. And Representative Weiler leads the New Hampshire House Finance Committee 1, which is responsible for the state budget. So in order to avoid any further public discussion of the unpopular voucher bill, Weiler had it tabled and slid it into the massive budget bill. Meanwhile, you remember Greg Moore. He's the head of Koch's Americans for Prosperity, New Hampshire. He had the AFP send out tens of thousands of postcards that say, what would you do with $4,600 toward your child's education? And of course, then the Josiah Bartlett Center distributed a policy paper to legislatures and the press in support of the bill. So since the bill was tabled and hidden in the budget, the public never got to discuss it again. The budget passed with the voucher bill. Governor Sununu signed it, saying that he couldn't veto an entire budget just because of one item. And take a drink of water. But let's think a minute. Why would our Free State fellow, whose motto is taxes theft, support vouchers that increase taxes? Well, probably he wasn't really paying attention. Or maybe he's just supporting his team. And it probably never occurs to him that vouchers will end up not only raising taxes, but his own rent. And he probably doesn't even have a child to benefit from the vouchers. Well, there goes mine. Okay, see, you weren't the only ones. After the vouchers and other Liberty Alliance priorities passed, the vice president of the Charles Koch Institute, William Ruger, and Free State founder Sorens named New Hampshire the freest of the 50 states. Governor Sununu attended the ceremony at the Cato Institute. Now, we talked about the Kochs being plagued by regulations, but why are billionaire libertarians so bent on destroying public education? Well, of course, if they could close all the public schools, taxes would drop. But another reason is just as important. Children must be taught to oppose their right to public services, democracy, and equal opportunity. The power of teacher unions has to be crushed. Meanwhile, the billionaires can hire low-skilled labor for less, and some of them, such as Betsy DeVos, own for-profit education companies that benefit from tax-funded vouchers. By 2022, as promised in Soren's original Free State proposal, the Free State Project had begun to defund the state government way beyond just careful management of a Reagan conservative. They cut revenues to engineer a future budget crisis. They continued to defund nursing homes, state parks, pensions, the arts, and public services. The Free Staters were well on their way to achieving their goals at the state level. But when they started in on local budgets, people began paying attention. Croydon libertarians fired their police department, but when Free Staters cut the school budget in half at a poorly attended meeting during a blizzard, townspeople fought back. They replaced the budget, but not until after libertarian actions gained a storm of national press coverage. Then libertarians tried to privatize the profitable public Gunstock ski area, as you know. Management was so mad, they walked out en masse, closed down the region's largest employer. The public woke up. Belknap County residents created a bipartisan anti-extremist voter guide. People wrote dozens of letters to editors. Yard signs sprouted statewide. Kent Street and my group, Bennett State Matters, sent out 104,000 handwritten postcards. Maybe some of you helped. As a result, the Free Staters lost their hold on the House Republican caucus, and Democrats were pretty close to parity. So, the Free State Project hired a new director, Eric Brakey, a libertarian state senator from Maine. Now, Brakey had served as the main chair for the Ron Paul presidential campaign, and that was the group that formed those Texas Young Americans for Liberty. Brakey convinced the Young Americans for Liberty to dedicate $1 million to winning back the New Hampshire legislature in 2024. Kelly Ayotte saw where the money was and sought the support of the Free State Project Liberty Alliance leaders. Here you can see her with Free Staters Rachel Goldsmith of Moms for Liberty, Jeremy Kaufman, an infamous fellow who runs the infamous New Hampshire Libertarian Party Twitter account, the New Hampshire Majority Leader Jason Osborne, and his wife who runs a voucher-funded school. Ayotte embraced her support despite their vicious actions and questionable practices. You can here see the kind of notices that Kaufman sends out in his tweets. So in 2024, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance won almost half of GOP seats. The previous spring, the Young Americans for Liberty, the Texas group, sent their president up to Nashua to speak to our Liberty candidates and others attending the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. I was there. I'm showing you this because this bill that this man's talking about clearly demonstrates the goals of billionaires who are backing the libertarians. This is Sean Temia. He's the president of the Young Americans for Liberty, and he's speaking in favor of a bill that would stop any publicly funded organization or person in New Hampshire from promoting their cause to a state or town body. I'm going to turn up my sound and hope that you can all hear.
We are starting the charge to make Liberty win and ensure that we continue fighting in New Hampshire. And it's things like ending taxpayer-funded lobbying, right? The notion that the Department of Transportation could take your money and spend that money on paying a gas tax lobbyist to go out and advocate for a higher gas tax seems a little silly, right? It seems like something that should garner bipartisan support. Your tax money should not be spent on lobbyists who want to enhance the government.
Okay, so could anybody hear that? No. Okay, so what he said was, he, as I say, he's from Texas. He came up to lobby against a bill which would not allow anyone who was publicly funded, even if you're a selectman, a paid selectman, you couldn't testify about anything. And he came up because at that point, DOT had a lobbyist come and explain to the committee why the gas tax needed to be raised, and it hasn't been raised for 20 years, so they came and gave reasons for that. Well, the Texas folks don't want gas tax raises, right? So they sent this fellow up to the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance to talk to New Hampshire reps and tell them to vote for this bill, which, okay, we will go on from here.
We are starting the charge.
If passed, the New Hampshire Municipal Association could not testify about bills that affected towns. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families could not testify about children. School superintendents could not testify about schools. And if you were a paid, as I say, select person or anybody else, you couldn't testify about anything. So the point is, quashing publicly funded voices means that only private corporations and billionaire lobbyists get to testify. Removing regulations lets the wealthy control what happens. Democracy protects the public from being controlled by the mighty, whether they're kings, con men, or corporations. That's why we need government. And that's what we've got to be able to explain to people. Without government, we do not have freedom. We have power, or might equals right. Well, this year, the Libertarians tried again to exert control over localities, but they ran into the same resistance as last time when they tried to cap local spending. So House Majority Leader Osborne made clear that they intend to achieve their goals through state-funded mandates regardless. And I think he's speaking louder. I was a long way from that other guy. He's speaking into a mic, so I think you can hear him.
Well, I tell you, we might have to put a leash on some of these local governments, right?
Yeah. So they intend to deny communities the right to control their zoning. Some of these have already passed, by the way. School spending. They tried caps in a number of towns, as you probably know. Energy and environmental policy. Their goals are to attract thousands of Liberty voters with mass, low-cost housing tracts, regardless of town zoning. Their bills ban towns' right to combine to share solar facilities, to control server farms, or to ban or control small nuclear facilities. It denies towns the right to regulate noise and pollution. Why? They're trying to attract crypto and AI server companies they've invited to open server farms here. The cooling fans on installations with thousands of servers can be heard over a mile away. And Elon Musk's server farm in Tennessee has creating so much pollution that they have all kinds of lawsuits against it. Removing local control will help them accelerate their program to move more libertarians here and take over the state. So the ending of this story is up to all of us. How can we take back our state? First, we need to understand that while there is big money behind these groups, and they are extremely well organized, the number of active Free Staters in New Hampshire is small. This is a photo of what they described as a packed house to hear the featured speaker at their annual National Pork Fest celebration. By the way, note the male-female ratio here. It is typical of Free State membership. So how is it that these few Free Staters and Liberty Alliance members win? Well, the outside money helps, but the way Free Staters win is smart. And you may well know this. They run for local level office. They make friends in community groups and farmers markets and so on. They hide or even deny their affiliation with the Free State Project or Liberty Alliance. They put up extreme straw man bills, like getting rid of speed limits, so that you won't notice the other things that they are doing and actually passing. They're sliding through a cut at the core of civil society. Like that young man in the taxes theft t-shirt who supports vouchers, many people don't realize that they are being manipulated for exploitation by the wealthy. Free Staters are fewer than 1% of the votes. We do not have to let them dominate the legislature and tip the scale on the governorship. We showed in 2022 that we can take them out of power bipartisanly. In fact, Free State Director Eric Brakey wrote that a reason he left Maine was that libertarians lost control of the state in 2018 and never regained it. That is what happens when the public realizes what these folks are up to. People do not support libertarian anarchistic policies. And if Maine can push out libertarians, we certainly can do it in New Hampshire. We've set up 6 steps to oust them from office. Now, before the national campaigns kick into high gear, we turn people's attention away from Trump. We can't do anything about Trump. And we turn it to the Free Staters' takeover of our state. To succeed, we have to build relationships outside the bubble. That's number 2, through church, through your knitting club, golf, whatever brings together people of many different views. And we're trying to find some people in the younger generation who, like 603 Forward and so forth, who we can work in to bring them into the fold, who can message their peers in ways that we don't know how to do, right? Then, when election season rolls around, we have to ID the Free State and Liberty Alliance candidates, and we have some information on how to do that. The next steps are standard election stuff. Your party knows how to do this. You ensure you have good candidates are running, which is hard, I know, but build strong campaigns for and against, and of course, get out the vote. We're working with groups and individuals across the state to create a coordination spreadsheet around these 6 goals. And by sharing what groups in different parts of the states are up to, we can motivate and spark ideas and teach each other as well to avoid duplication. So the first step we'll focus on through the end of summer, is awareness. And we provide books and so forth, as you can see here. We're also, with Indivisible, we're sending postcards similar to what you do, but they're less candidate specific. They're more about the Free Staters in general. And then each of them goes to a web page specific to the town that shows the Free Staters in that town. And we're targeting these toward flippable districts with Free Staters. Obviously, we're speaking, and it's not just Up. There's a group called Granite State Progress that is also speaking about the Free Staters. We're working on social media, and you can see that we're trying to achieve awareness. And what I'm hoping that you will do is to take some of these flyers, to take some of these books, and not just read them, but pass them on. That's the important part. The flyers are on our website. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So the second step, it may be the hardest. Given that 38% of the voters are undeclareds, we have to reach outside the bubble. These are a few of the efforts that are crossing partisan boundaries, but we need to do much more. And one I haven't added in there yet in this slide is the listening sessions. Have you guys your rep had a listening session yet? You have? Yeah, then you know Wendy Thomas, Representative Wendy Thomas of Merrimack, has led, she's got a whole guide that's both at our website and that she can provide you that tells step by step how to arrange a listening session, how to carry it out, what to do for follow-up. It has an example of a press release. She's held 31 listening sessions across the state so far. And she said they're very well attended, and it gives people a chance. She says they do hear the same thing that I was asking Karen about earlier. I said, what are the big issues here? And Karen said, housing, education, property taxes. Anybody else have another top issue? That's pretty much it. Well, that's what they're hearing in the listening sessions too. But at least it's bringing out people, and it's helping to bring out people from both sides. So these are ways to cross and to get out of the bubble and let people feel like they're being heard. And also you can connect with them, of course, as you have these listening sessions. So you can get that document if you go to our website, and I will make it available to Karen, and she can send it out to everybody if you're interested. As I said, we're doing postcards to the undeclareds, and we're trying to host these kind of presentations in nonpartisan sessions. I've got 2 nonpartisan sessions, one up north and one at a place called the World Fellowship Center. Anybody? You know that? Okay, that's next week. So, but you folks obviously are the core of it. I mean, I'm one person. Each town needs to build teams that are working to create that awareness within the town, and then be able to reach those low information voters. The agenda of the Free Staters is widely unpopular, but people don't understand that they've taken over the Republican Party. So they vote Republican, because they've always voted Republican. So that means IDing the Liberty Alliance candidates in your town. And if they're already serving, that's easy. There's actually a list of them, which they publicize themselves. So we put the ones who get a B+ and above. That means they vote with the Liberty Alliance. I think it's something like 85% of the time or more. We put them on this list. But they also publish a list of their endorsed candidates before an election. And figuring out the local candidates or new state candidates is much, much harder, of course. There are a few clues here. We have a list of questions you can download at our website, which is granitestatematters.org. Do they want to ban local control of school funding, etc., all the things that you heard, put a leash on the town? Do they want to defund, close, or totally deregulate what they're elected to run? Do they want to privatize public services in a way that excludes low-income residents, like the privatized nursing homes that kick people out who have nothing but Medicare? Do they want to bar public officials and publicly funded nonprofits from testifying, as we were saying? You can find, as I said, this information at our website. And then once we have good people running for office, we need to be smart about messaging and think about how will putting a leash on towns hurt your specific community. People blame zoning for a lack of affordable housing, but is it really that? Or is it wealthy out-of-staters buying second homes since investment income is no longer taxed? Or is it corporations buying up housing and turning them into Airbnb that's taking housing away from working people? Or, if you're not in Moultonborough or one of the other low-tax towns, is it the state's refusing to pay its share of education funding both Jason Osborne and the governor have stated that they will not meet the Supreme Court requirement to raise education funding. And that would lower property taxes and make everything more affordable. Rents as well. You know best how to make your message local and which of these arguments is going to be most compelling in your area. So to keep up with actions to remove Free Staters from office, I hope that you will sign up for the Granite State Matters Facebook page if you use Facebook. You'll find tools at our website that you can use to make others aware of what you've learned. We have videos, an ebook, this downloadable flyer, and feel free to share anything on our website. You don't have to ask. If you are a member of a group that's working on this issue that others should know about, and if you want to be on that spreadsheet to help other people be aware of what you're doing so that they can model it, just let me know. And that's the story. I hope that you will help me make the ending a good one. Remember, we don't have much impact in DC, but we can totally change the leadership in New Hampshire. Totally. So I have books for you to read, but more importantly are that you hand the books and stuff to each other. And your donation will go to our hosts. So thank you.